I have the benefit and opportunity of sharing this webinar stage with Namrata here, who is part of the committee and is the reason we do all of these sessions and webinars. So she's the one who's putting all of this together so that it comes to us as participants. We have with us Narasimhan as well. Well, I will have the benefit of introducing him very soon. Friends, just a brief 30 seconds from my end on cybersecurity, which is almost an imminent need now with the onset of the pandemic. The Computer Emergency Response Team, there is an organization that actually mandated to track and monitor cybersecurity incidents. They have reported 6 lakh incidents up to June 21. Right, that's just 3 months and 6 lakh incidents. This number for the previous year was 11 lakh and the year before was 3 lakh. So we are at 6 lakhs for 3 months, which is multifold from some of these incidents happening in the past. So with that introduction, we have our learned speaker, CA Narasimhan Elangovan. Narasimhan is a partner at Ken & Co and a senior advisor at the Digital Security Services in Crove Advisory Services LLP. Narasimhan is a futurist and a GRC professional. His areas of expertise include data analytics, risk-based audit, privacy impact assessments, internal audits, information systems assurance, internal financials control, and SOX compliance and SOC audits. He's assisted a variety of entities from their startups to large corporates in the fields of BFSI, telecom, retail, fintech, airlines, e-commerce, and governments across domestic and foreign countries. He is a faculty for DISA, CISA, and courses on blockchain technology, and has authored 4 books for the ICI on technology. He has also spoken at international conferences at Dubai, Malaysia, Bangkok, Saudi, Doha, and Nairobi, and has been identified as one of the top 10 influential consulting leaders 2020 by the CEO Insights magazine. With this short but much more to come introduction of Narasimhan, I would request him to take it ahead from here and share with us on what opportunities we have as professionals in this new area of practice. Over to you, Narasimhan. Narasimhan, you're on mute. I think, yeah.
Please confirm if you're able to hear me, see the slides, as well as see me. All 3 okay?
Yes, and your smile.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's always wonderful, to share thoughts and discuss with our alma mater. A lot of interesting opportunities are getting lined up day by day. And let me tell you, cybersecurity is the next happening thing across, right? And more importantly, new things which we had not even envisaged years before are now coming up. So this only requires our mind to be tuned a little. The reason why I say that the mind has to be tuned a little is because the way we actually approach things has to change. For example, if we keep thinking that, okay, I will wait for regulatory opportunities, I will wait for, let's say, a law to be enforced, based on that I will do the audit or etc. Those, I would probably say that's a reactive thought process. I think proactive thought process is, can we see certain things within our own circle and take up opportunities within that? Right? And here there are multiple things. You will not believe the number of opportunities which are lined up. You just have to do some bit of additional research. For instance, there is a cybersecurity framework which is given by the RBI. There is a cybersecurity framework which is given by the IRDA. There is another cybersecurity framework which is given by the SEBI. One could just possibly just look into that itself and try to do some bit of analysis. So much of opportunity is lined up there, right? And you might be thinking, sir, it is difficult for me to get clients. That is the biggest problem. It's always the chicken and egg story. We do not get the client because we do not have the knowledge. We do not have the knowledge because we do not have the client. right? So it's sort of becoming a chicken and egg story, which comes first. And therefore, I would rather suggest we should all try to follow a slightly different approach. Trying to follow a slightly distinct approach, where what we do is try to get in touch with various stakeholders within the framework, within this entire environment, and they hopefully be able to embrace you and give you much more opportunities. You just have to give it a try. Right? So that is something which we should get going, and that, my dear friends, is going to change a whole lot of, or rather whole lot of new landscape itself. Okay. So I'm going to get started with this. Just give me a minute. Sorry. Okay. So ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this exciting journey where we're going to learn, unravel, and probably look into some new opportunities. I think an introduction about myself was made, so I'm not going to spend too much time into this. General views are personal, nothing to do with a specific organization. Okay. I thought I'll try to cover a bunch of these broad domains, what you notice out here, starting from IT audit, ITGC, internal financial controls. They have a relevance from a cybersecurity parlance. I just come back to it because unless we get the basics right, it doesn't make sense. Then there is a whole lot of third-party vendor opportunities, third-party vendor reviews, right? And then you have the data privacy, ISO 27001, some bit of analytics. Again, that's more on a technology space. I would rather give it a slightly broader view. And then some things on the emerging technologies where, again, opportunities are getting lined up. So first is basics, because all of them are driven with, sorry, can I please request everybody to be on mute just to avoid the confusion? Thank you.
Yeah.
I've just muted everybody just in case, there's an accidental this thing. Okay. So the first things first, let's head the basics right. We need to clearly understand the scope of IT audit and also understand one of the biggest asked question is, what is the difference between information security and cyber security? There is no written piece of difference today, frankly speaking, my dear friends. There is no written piece of difference at all. But the way it has evolved is, earlier organizations were very, very intranet driven. Everything was within their intranet. And there was a very limited exposure to the external world. And when I use the word limited exposure to the external world, I'm talking about a network infrastructure standpoint. So predominantly they had their own email servers. Correct. Those of you who are work with larger corporates, you will know that email servers were the order of the day that point in time, right? And you had your own email server rules. Your friend, your competitor, or your friend's organization had email server rules, and managing that itself was a massive thing. And today we need not even bother about an email server rule because all of them is cloud hosted and cloud managed, right? So that itself, you have a huge change in the perspective. So information technology and information security and cyber security, if you go read it together, the way it is looked into is, cyber security gives that external perspective and information security gives that internal perspective. That is the only way people have probably looked into it. But I would say both of them today are interchangeably used. That's my view of it, right? I'm not a guy who goes beyond, behind definitions. I'm going more on the practical usage. Now, when we know what is an information, it is basically a valuable asset, and we are trying to protect it. There are multiple attacks which are possible, and there are multiple roles or caps which we need to wear. Please bear in mind, we are not always the auditor. We may also be doing the implementation, right? So couple of these things, if you keep it in mind, I think our conversation, whenever we discuss, it will be much easier. So first, I'm going to spend a few minutes on the IT infrastructure and IT environment, and then probably I'll add it up with much more cybersecurity pieces. Okay. So today, any system which is an automated environment is typically based out of three broad things. You have the people element, you have the process element, and you have the what is called as the technology element. And these three are very, very essential. Why this I make it as very essential is, moment you look into any automated environment, it could be QuickBooks, it could be Tally, SAP, Zoho Books, or for that matter, even SAP R3, right? Or S4HANA, which is the latest of SAP, right? Any of them, there is always a 3-layer approach. The database layer, the application layer, the presentation layer. The presentation layer is normally through an agent or a Windows or a Chrome or a Excel, sorry, not Excel, what is that? Microsoft Edge or an Internet Explorer interface, or sometimes you have an app through that you can navigate it. The database is predominantly an Oracle database, RDBMS system. Of course, today we're talking about MongoDB and other fancy types of database coming into picture. And then you have the application engine, which is the core logic. Any system you look into, you will always find these 3 separations. Now, surrounding this is a bunch of information security practices, goals, and whatever you can call it, right? So if you look into any automated environment, you typically have database, you have operating system, you have networks, and then you have physical environment. And let me remind you, all these 3 or whatever we looked into are essential. All these 3 are essential, right? When you focus on a database, the perspective is different. Your audit objective is different, right? Yeah, of course, you are doing an implementation there, the objective is different, right? So when you're looking at a database, the focus is on whether the database has a file integrity or a version integrity maintained. Second, what is the process of modification authentication, right? Because in a database, if backend certain things are possible to change, the entire system can collapse, right? And also we need to very carefully look into the interfaces between the application environment and the database environment and how they are very tightly coupled or linked. Then comes your OS layer. OS layer is typically where your system or the software is hosted, correct? Predominantly, mainframe computers use Linux, Unix, etc. There are a good number of companies who also use a Windows powered. And today we also see, the modern age startups coming up with Macintosh and things. Then you have storage devices, right? When it comes to storage devices, you have a bunch of things, disks, tapes, how it is being recorded, how it is being stored, etc. And then comes network devices. These are LAN, WAN, interconnections, and your physical environment, which is your CCTVs, temperature controls, physical access, etc. Now, why this is important is because whenever you do any sort of a cybersecurity opportunity, defining the scope is very clear, very important. Because when we go for a financial audit, we know that our audit does not go beyond a balance sheet P&L. Our audit does not go beyond the Excel spreadsheet or the Word documents or review of contracts, etc. But when it comes to information security or when it comes to cyber security, the opportunities are huge. The opportunities are huge. Why do I say opportunities are huge? Or rather, the landscape itself is huge. You can have an operational system, you can have a key financial application system, you can have a non-key financial application system, you can have an interrelated system. I'll just give an example of a bank. A bank, if you just look into their IT environment, is massive. They may have an attendance tracking separate system, a HRMS, a loan management system, a core banking system such as Finacle, FlexCube, whatever, correct? Then there may be certain credit risk monitoring system. There may be certain things which are operational, right? And today we're talking about banks having fintech and modern methods. So these fintech and modern methods also have their own sort of an interfaces involved, right? So that also could be another area where probably possibilities are there. So the automated environment is multi-fold, and this is very critical because when you look from a cybersecurity angle, when you look from an information security, when you look from any audit objective, I think this becomes very critical. Now let's look into what is the regulatory framework and standards covering this. Okay, typically you have the Companies Act, where is a ready to go opportunity as a part of internal financial controls. Now often this is a forgotten area. Please bear in mind, many of the companies say that okay, this audit is not mandatory. That is okay, but the management still has to certify that they have internal financial controls. And any company, let me tell you, any company which has at least 3 to 5 systems having a basic interfaces with the connection with the environment is a potential opportunity for audit or a potential opportunity for implementation. Now today, many companies, let's take a simple example. In the last 1.5 years, a lot of these companies have gone digital. They're accepting orders through Amazon. They're doing digital marketing. they're having this Swiggy related based setup, right? Now, let's take a simple restaurant itself, right? Or a cloud kitchen, all these fancy terminologies. So Zomato gives you one report, Swiggy gives you one report. You may have a tie-up with another. Let's say I think Amazon also has a concept of Amazon food delivery now. So you have these three fellows. Now there is a place where they get integrated. There is something called as a settlement cycle. There is a refund process. Correct? You could be a e-commerce company who's supplying directly B2C. How are you tracking your refund passes? So what is the integration? Now that is where a bunch of questions from an audit functional level come into picture. The second important is how many of them are cyber security or security oriented. And when I focus on security, how are you ensuring the basic access is taken care of? How are you focusing that the basic integrity is taken care of? How are you focusing on basic availability of the data is taken care of, right? So you can just simply define it and get going. Okay. Now there is a beautiful guidance which is available in this IFC by our own institute. Second, ISACA, okay, which is the Information System Audit Control Association, which is today they just call it as ISACA, the Global Organization for Information Security. The Indian unit had come up with an IFC guidance, okay, on the technology related controls. That's an excellent read for you. Go through it, you get an idea onto how you should be looking at it. All right, I'll speak about frameworks also. It's covered somewhere in the presentation, so it's all covered so that you get a visibility. Then you have the RBI, banking, NBFC, RRB, etc. There is a mandatory requirement that a firm with a CISA or a DISA qualification or a CISSP, correct, with 2+ years of audit experience can probably go ahead and pick this up. And what do I do in that? It is also covered. Specific scope itself, I'll take you through. And if possible, I'll also take you through a few of these guidelines, which is available in the public domain. Then comes SEBI. SEBI defines what is called as a terms of reference. Okay. And let me tell you, this terms of reference is very simple, crystal clear. And the beauty of IRDA, RBI, and SEBI is it's a very, very checklist driven, clearly written what is the expectation. So if you are able to top it up with additional requirement, what is necessary from a cyber security perspective, you've got it. In fact, I'll just speak about all the three a little more later in detail, but this I'm just giving you overall holistic. Then you have a bunch of best practices when you take up for any sort of these audits, right? Of course, our own institute standards, section 143 of the Companies Act, guidance note on IFC, the SOX. SOX, let me tell you, is a huge potential. Again, there we do a lot of ITGC testing. What is ITGC? I'm just going to come in a few minutes. ISO 27001 2013 is the latest standard. It's expected to be, the next version may come up this year or next year, but nevertheless, that is another interesting opportunity. ITIL, COBIT, CSF, Cybersecurity Framework by the NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology by the US. Now this, let me tell you, all of these are ready-made checklists and guidelines. If you feel that I do not know how to do a cybersecurity audit, the simplest start point for you would be just pick up an ISO 27001:13 standard. There are free guidance available. Some of them are paid. You can just probably look it up. Just take the 114 controls defined under the ISO 27001. You blindly read that control and requirement. Then and there, you will know what exactly is your scope. And it is very, very structured. And it's very, very structured. So that gives you a good basis of it. Let me see if time permits. I'll also take you through those as well as wherever possible, practical guidelines I'll take. A few other things, payment card industry standard, again, huge potential, PCI DSS. All right. And a PCI DSS, there is again a very, very clearly defined framework and a guideline. And PCI standards, there are certifications available. You can go and top it up and you can take it up, right? So there are again few things. SSAE number 16. So what I'm speaking now is more like a gist on what are the various opportunities. Each of these opportunities I'll be drilling down. Okay, so just for the benefit of audience, don't think that it ends with this. Then we have a COSO framework, excellent guide for you to implement internal controls. You can just download it. There are free versions available in case you not know what is a search. COSO ERM framework or COSO internal control framework is the search word, or you can search for COSO Excel templates, guides, you get all of them available. Yeah, these are available. And let me also see how best I can, populate or circulate this entire thing information also. These 17 principles of COSO further have what is called as point of focus. Point of focus. Okay. If you search for point of focus of the COSO framework, that itself gives you a ready-made available guideline for you to get started when it comes to cybersecurity. Okay. So that's, I mean, that is a general, please bear in mind, COSO framework is an internal control framework of which IT controls is one small portion. In fact, if you see over here, you will notice that one of these, okay, out of these 17 points, only a few of them specifically focus on the technology. For example, identification of risks, identity and access changes, right? So those are things which are specifically focusing on technology. And you have information and communication a couple of places, right? Control activities. So there are specific domains where technology is focused on. Otherwise, in general, this is an excellent information available. Okay, and let me tell you, cybersecurity is applicable anywhere and everywhere. As long as you are having digital data, the principles of cybersecurity come into picture. And as I told you, information security, cybersecurity today more or less are converging. Okay, so let's go into certain specific things. Okay, you know, for what is called as ITGC and IT application, I'll just try to spend some time on it so that you're able to get it. Okay, ITGC, IT general control, and then you have ITAC, IT application control. Now, what is the difference between both of these? In a general control audit, you are focusing on the environment surrounding the key IT resources. Say, for example, SAP or Tally. You don't audit SAP or Tally, you audit the environment surrounding it. Meaning, is it physically safeguarded? How do I have access physically? How is the database taken? Is the backup taken? All of these are general controls. Okay, the components, processes, etc. Then you have the application audit itself. And please bear in mind, application audit is predominantly driven by the business goal or the objective. A simple example is a three-way match principle, right? A three-way match principle is again a pure application audit, right? Because you are defining what is the rules different in the system. Now there is a rule which RBI came up with. All the companies, all the banks have to have a non-performing asset management completely digitized and automated. There are multiple circulars which RBI has come up in the last 3 to 6 months. Go ahead and take it up, see what best you can do, right? And it is not practical that you always take up engagements in your own entity or identity. You can always try to collaborate with stakeholders, key auditors or larger companies and see what best you can deliver, right? And then you have SOC. SOC is a service organization controls. I'm not going to touch upon this now because there's a huge potential there. Of course, in the next few slides, I'll speak. Then is ISO 27001. Then you have a very interesting called HIPAA compliance. Now, HIPAA compliance is more to do with the health insurance, typically applicable for US-based companies who have their units, customers, subsidiaries in India, and very important, are dealing with healthcare. Now, HIPAA compliance is something which is interesting because it's please note, all of these regulatory driven compliances, we have a huge potential. Why? We can understand the regulatory framework reasonably well with our expertise on interpreting the law. Second, we also have an understanding of risk. When we combine both of this, we just need to top it up with the understanding of technology. If we're able to get this, we are able to carve a niche for ourselves. Then comes your PCI DSS, payment card industry. As I told you, there are again checklists which are available, a simple checklist, and that PCI DSS is a rule-based. So if it says that you have to do it this way, you have to do it. There's no other option. Even if a small word or a small deviation is there, just go ahead and mention it is not applicable. And in PCI DSS, many players or many of these, it works on a self-certification basis. Other than your, if in case your volume is fairly large, many of the players, it just works on a self-certification basis. Forget that you're doing an independent cybersecurity audit, just pick up PCI DSS framework itself and apply. Right? It becomes a good checklist for you to get started. And then we have today, you know, what is called as the SOX, I did make a mention, the GDPR, data privacy. That's another huge potential where a bunch of opportunities are actually lined up, right? So with this, I hope the basic introduction all of you have got. I'm going to touch upon certain specific areas so that we'll be able to drill a little deeper. As I told you, what is an IT general control? It is the controls surrounding your IT application, your main application, whatever applications are there. I mean, not just main, any application. There are a bunch of controls surrounding it. When you focus on the controls surrounding that application, we call it as general controls. We focus on controls which are inbuilt within the application. It's called as application control. A simple example, in Tally or in SAP, every debit or credit should match, or there is something called as a two-way match. There's something called invoice tolerance. If you're looking into those are application audits. But how am I accessing Tally? How am I accessing SAP? How am I accessing user access management? Do I have the network? Do I have the database? How is the database protected? Is the database regularly backed up? Correct? All of those comes in your general controls, right? And general controls are normally referred to as pervasive or indirect controls, right? And this slide, feel free to take a clip or snapshot or snip of it, is a holistic perspective of IT general controls. Why? I mean, I will not say 100%, I would say at least 90 to 95%. Broadly, any IT general controls focus on 4 broad domains at a high level: system development, computer operation, program changes, access. There may be certain things like, antivirus, cybersecurity, all those things. That's addition. Now, any general controls, if you look into across all the cybersecurity frameworks anywhere in the world, you will find these 4 things mandatory. System development. The process deployed for you doing a system development is what is a simple language. Now, today, the system development process has undergone so much of changes. Earlier was a legacy approach. 6 months, I used to define a project plan, or 1 year. This month I will do this month I will do this. So until the end of the year, I will not get visibility of what I am building. So perhaps I asked for oranges, I got a tomato or a potato. I will get to know only after 1 year. And there it became a huge area for, your entire 1 year effort is gone. And that is where today modern system methodologies focus on what is called agile, rapid application, right? Prototype. Now, what do? They build small and they build often. Today, we're talking about something called as a DevOps cycle. That is something which is being followed by most of these startup companies and modern new age companies. What is that? You keep on moving an application into production and you keep on adding a new feature on a continuous basis, which means what was happening in 1 year, today you are still doing in 1 year, but in 12 or 24 or 48 cycles. That means every once in 2 weeks or once a week, you go ahead and release a new feature. I have noticed many companies, they have a concept called patch Thursday or a patch Friday or a fortnightly patch. They keep on introducing a new feature or a new instance. Of course, there could be certain things which require much more time, and there's an independent team who's working on it. There are smaller changes which has been done, and that is being performed by another organization. And this is a continuous process. And this is what many of the companies follow. Now, in this entire DevOps cycle, your system development is very, very critical. Starting from the need to the stage of implementation and segregation of duties is important. A very, very simple basic thing is, do programmers have access to the production environment? A very basic check. A very basic check. Whether you are a cloud hosted company, you are a standalone company, you are hosting your data in your traditional method, you have an on-premise server, option is yours. But there are plenty of items to discuss, right? So that is system development. Initiation, construction, testing, data conversion. Now this is in the traditional approach. In the modern approach, multiple steps of this are integrated and it works on what is called as a DevOps cycle. Now, in the DevOps cycle, there are much more technological advancements which have taken place. Of course, I'm not going to go into core technology. We're talking about something called containerization. We're talking about infrastructure as a code. The entire infrastructure is given as a code. So you just write over it, right? It's more like this, what is this? Cloud offices, not cloud offices. What is that concept called? WeWork and other companies have this concept, right? I'm just not able to recollect. Plug and play offices. Plug and play offices, right? Virtual office, plug and play office, whatever they say that, you just come use my office and then disappear. Correct? And today companies are going for that. The same method, infrastructure as a code. You're talking about Kubernetes, containerization, Dockers. Now, all these are newer terminologies which have come up today. And each of them, you just need to understand what this concept and where it is being used. And as auditor, we'll be able to identify the risks. I'm telling you, it is not so very complicated. Understand the core purpose, how it is deployed, what are the possible things, right? I had opportunities. I was not very I was fairly new to these terminologies at least a couple of years back, and I got the opportunity to do one of these modern age companies audit, and I was a little lost. So I just did some basic research on the 4 or 5 terminologies which they did, and when I asked them a question, they said that, sir, you're right, I understand that these terminologies are new for you, but how are you able to identify this gap? Because we understand the process. That's our expertise. We understand the risk as auditors, right? And this, you can be on the other side. You may be giving guidance to companies on how you are implementing software, and this is something which you can look into. Now, the relative of or a brother sister of the system development is a program changes. Just that it is minor, correct? It could be sometimes you identified a bug fixing may probably require a change in program itself, right? Or as a part of this program changes, you may be doing small other exercise which perhaps they had forgotten to mention, or there might be a change in the regulatory environment. Let's say a simple thing like the law, the NPA provision rates have changed, NPA rule framework of 90 days has become 180 days or whatever. There is some sort of a rule book change, and that you want to introduce, that becomes a program change. Quite similar, the processes are similar, but you need to understand a very critical thing, UAT and other side. Then you have computer operations, starting from batch processing, interface processing, monitoring, right? Backing up of data, computer center operations. So a whole lot of these things are areas where you can possibly look at. And then comes the main core process, access review. This is sometimes referred to as identity and access. This is some they call it as IDAM, IAM, etc. If you look into Microsoft or Azure or AWS, they use the word IAM, Identity and Access Management. Let's take a very simple example. You're talking about an application like Amazon app, or Netflix movie streaming platform, right? Now, a concern for you from a Netflix, if you were an auditor, was very simple. You are an auditor of Netflix. Netflix is purely subscription based, right? So your focus is very simple as a revenue leakage. What will you focus on? Are there sharing of user access? This is a very basic thing, right? Now, Netflix would have implemented policies and etc. And Netflix knows that they will invariably be sharing of users. And that is why they permit 1 or 2 devices to be sharing the user credentials. But there is a maximum amount of number. You cannot share it for 25 numbers with 1 license. Maybe 2 or 3, those of you using it, you are experts in that. Now, then they came up that, hey, 100% this will happen within family and friends. So they came up with family and friend package for, let's say, whatever X price per month. You are permitted, they themselves permit you to share for 5 different people. And each of these 5 people can share it with 1 or 2 devices, because it could be a mobile phone, it could be a laptop, it could be a TV, whatever it is. Now here, the focus for you is to understand how the access configuration rule has been driven or configured. There is something called concurrent users. That means how many users logged in at a given point in time. Can there be issues? Can there be risks pertaining to that? Can there be revenue leakages, right? Now, this is how you define or link your technological audit, your cybersecurity framework, and your the accounting framework, and probably start looking into it. The same thing if you're looking from a cybersecurity angle, is that the purely cybersecurity, it's a little different. I'm just trying to give you multiple hats, which caps which you can wear, so that you are also able to get that perspective. Now, if you're looking from a cybersecurity perspective, now the developer or whoever is adding content, a very basic thing is, what if that content has possibility of downloading that information? You will see many of these websites where there'll be a video which is playing. A simple thing what you can do is right click any of the places, you will get what is called as access the source of this page. You click on that and take your mouse on the left hand side on that video. In the right hand side, you will get the link where the video is. Copy that link and you can download that video. Now imagine if that happened on Netflix. Everybody will be downloading and nobody want to subscribe, right? So the way they design for them, the biggest crown jewel or the biggest asset for them is that movie or the video or the series. Now you could imagine how much of controls they should be having purely on that, right? So who has access to the administration, security, operating system, security, network, security, logical security, and it's endless. And that is what you focus in access to programs and data. Here you focus at 4 layers: database layer, operating system layer, application layer, and very important is the network layer. Now, please bear in mind, in the modern companies or startup companies, modern age companies, all of this is driven through cloud-based application environment. Your code is stored on GitHubs or its equivalent. GitHub is owned by Microsoft today, right? It's a pure code repository. There are multiple companies who are quite similar to that. Your ticketing and your application things is done through companies like Atlassian or Jira or even any of these ticketing tools. Who has access? Wow, how sometimes it's even done through GitHub. Then you have the application which is hosted on either Azure or the Google Cloud, or for that matter, it could also be AWS. Now, within that, you might be creating multiple virtual private clouds and virtual private infrastructure. That means the same principles you need to slightly modify to probably look into how it works when it comes to cloud. Okay, I'm not going too much into cloud because if I go into cloud, that is another 2 hours of discussion. Maybe cloud security I'll probably take up as one other topic, maybe a few months later or so, depending on how things work. Yeah. So I hope you got a perspective of what an ITGC control is, how we focus, right? And there is an element of security, which again, I have not touched here. I'll be specifically making a mention of it. So hang on. And where do this entire ITGC fit in? This is the list. You have the risk arising from the use of IT. Immediately after that is the ITGs, the general controls. Because the general controls are a sort of a filter for any sort of additional control subsequently. A simple example, you might have a manual control that every time somebody does something, there has to be a check and balance or something signature or a checkbook, whatever it is. But that is kept in a safe custody. To access that, you require a biometric enabled fingerprint or touch. That means the biometric enabled fingerprint or touch is what is called as preliminary access, IT general controls, and then you may have a manual control, IT dependent control, or fully automated control. Now, what do you do in a typical ITGC? Please bear in mind this, whatever I'm speaking about are fundamentals. Then we go into certain specifics of cybersecurity, right? So you do what is called as evaluating the existing controls, discuss with the stakeholders, identify the proper processes, examine the NTE of these controls, assess the reliability of the source data, completeness of population. This is very critical when you're doing a general control. A simple thing, you may have a cybersecurity control that every change management process, that means every new change is undergone 3 levels of verification. Now, for this, what you have to do, you have to do 2 things. Pick up the list of all changes which has been made in the application and see whether all these 10, 15, 25 changes which has been made in this application have supporting evidences or documentation or an approval process, etc. Now, if any of this has not gone through it, that is a cause of concern for you, right? So you test the key reports, you look into the spreadsheets, perform risk-based sampling and reporting. So this part of it is your traditional audit topped up with your IT general controls. And this is where your overall ITGCs fit in. You may have certain three or 4 applications at a high level, predominantly focused on each of the application has its own objectives. Underneath that, you have what is called as the general IT controls setup, right? So that is where your IT controls comes in. Okay, I'll just pause here for a few minutes. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to take it. No questions at all?
Narasimhan, I think we had a couple of questions while they're coming in. One earlier one was, is cybersecurity also applicable in the digital marketing segment?
It is applicable for every industry. It really doesn't matter you're in digital marketing. In fact, all the more important is in digital marketing. There are what is possible called as social media restrictions, right? Social media controls. You may have to define that. You may have to see how those are being taken care of.
Okay, there's another question, difference in GRC audit and ITGC audit.
There is no predefined language or a definition, but how I look into it is that GRC is a very, very broad governance, risk, and compliance. The broad domain of GRC today, it focuses on internal audit, IT audit, information security, cyber security. All of those are very, very high level. And today, the one word which defines the entire landscape today is called GRC: governance, risk, and compliance, because you're also looking into the regulatory framework. But on the other side, within that, there are multiple silos or small units. For instance, we have what you rightly pointed out, ITGC. ITGC is a small part of the overall GRC, because in ITGC, you focus on specific applications. You're not looking at a holistic perspective, right? So you're looking at specific application. You can do an overall ITGC as well, but you're not looking at IT applications. So GRC is a very broader terminology. Each of them has these verticals. Next question, please. Any other specific question which has come up? Let me also see. I noticed a couple. I think does cyber security or ITGC apply to cloud-based planning tool? As I told, cyber security or information security will apply for any basic things. Okay, one of the often considered myth is I am using a cloud application and therefore cyber security is taken care by the other organization, not by me. Hang on. Please understand there is something called as the shared risk assessment model. When we are talking about cloud applications, there is something called as a shared risk assessment. Now, what is the shared risk assessment? It basically is nothing but who owns up what. I repeat, who owns up what. Now, when I use this word, who owns up what, a very, very basic example I'll give you. Now, most of us are using Gmail. All of us are using Gmail, right? Now, when you're using a Gmail, what are the possible risks you think according to you? You will say, sir, what is there, sir? Google is taking care of all this. Great. Now, one very basic question to you is, if you have kept your Gmail password in an easily guessable method, can you hold Google accountable for it, or will you be held accountable for it? The answer is you. That means even though the system is developed by Google or the ownership is by Google, there are definitely some responsibilities which is on your end, That means it is your responsibility to define adequate passwords. It is your responsibility to define two-factor authentication. Now imagine the same you, slightly modify the example. Your entire organization, you're using the corporate or what is called as the G Suite. I'm not sure how many of them are aware. There are a bunch of G Suite configurations itself which you can do, thereby which you can eliminate the risk. There are so many things within the G Suite level itself which you can do. You can eliminate or you can take care of the G Suite related risk. You can just go online and search for G Suite security. You'll get one very interesting document, right? So the question is very simple. You need to focus on understanding what exactly are the risks involved. Now let's take another example. Most of these companies which I made a mention, right? Or you take even SaaS-based companies such as Dropbox. SaaS-based companies as Dropbox. Now, if you are deleting a particular folder, is Dropbox going to own up the responsibility for it? The answer is no. Maximum, it will give you a warning, sir. It will not do anything beyond that, right? It is not going to do anything beyond that, because it is your responsibility to take care of whatever, the protection, the safeguard, passwords, etc. So you need to bear in mind every SaaS-based application from a user level, there are certain mandatory controls you have to enforce. Okay, so that is something which you have to take into. I hope I have answered that question. Does cyber security apply? Yeah, I think I've answered that. Are there any regulations, counterparts applicable in India similar to HIPAA and GDPR? For HIPAA equivalent, we had what is called as a Disha, which was proposed. It did not take off for various reasons. For GDPR equivalent, we have currently the Information Technology Act, read with Sensitive Personal Data Regulations 2011. Then we have a formal data privacy bill, which is coming up very soon in India. Okay, and let me tell you, once data privacy bill in India takes full shape, you have host of opportunities. There is no end to it, if you ask me. Okay, so since they're not, okay, one last question, I'll take it. Are there mandatory requirements under these acts for compulsory audit? Pradeep, I'm just going to speak about that. So what are the mandatory driven scope and what is the regulatory driven scope? So first and foremost, from a regulatory driven, you have RBI NBFC regulations. Now this is a very simple, straightforward regulation which you can go ahead and start implementing. Statistics say as of January 31st, 2021, there is 9,507 NBFCs registered with RBI. This master direction clearly says that every NBFC has to follow a minimum set of regulations or a minimum set of security framework. And for that, let us quickly go through the framework so that you get an idea. Okay, so I'm just doing a simple Google search. Just type for RBI cybersecurity audit, or you can type RBI cybersecurity audit for NBFC. Okay, so you normally get the first. Okay, please go only to the RBI website. Others have a lot of information. Yes, this is a beautiful framework. Now, what it says is, it is a master direction on information technology framework for the NBFC sector. I hope you're able to see my Chrome page. Okay, scroll down, it talks about certain basic things. Okay, and it says section A and section B. Section B is a more little relaxed. Recommendations for NBFC with asset size below 500 crore. Smaller companies, asset size, and many of the NBFCs fall within this. Many of the NBFCs, I don't have the stratification or the comparison of how many falls within this. You can probably look it up. Many of the NBFCs fall within this below 500. Now, there's a huge bunch of those which also falls above 500 crore where this is your requirement. IT governance, IT policy, information and cyber security. Look at that language RBI itself uses. IT ops, IS audit, BCP, IT outsourcing. Right? So that itself is a huge potential. Now, and there's a nice framework, you can just worthwhile to go through it. I think it's not more than about, if you print it, it doesn't go beyond 10 or 20 pages. It's a nice framework for you to get started. Okay, so that's one potential which I could share off immediately. Okay, please bear in mind below 500 and more than 500. Next comes for banks. Now the domains which I spoke of, quite similar to that RBI for banks also has proved. And please note this wordings used it for all banks. That means cooperatives, RRBs, nationalized, private, whatever you call it, all the banks, as long as you're doing the banking business. And here the focus is on the following domains: information technology governance. Now here, governance audit is something as auditors or as professionals, if you're able to understand some bit of technology, it becomes very easy for you to go through. Information technology governance. How do I get started with it? What is the meaning of governance? Is there a committee? Is there a strategic committee? Is there a IT implementation committee? What are the roles, responsibilities? Are they enforcing it? Are there minutes? Are there discussions taking place? So governance is something fair bit of it is easier for you to look into. Then comes a bunch of information security. So here it is a fairly wide domain, right? And here you can benchmark it ISO 27001, it becomes very handy. Then you have your IT operations, day-to-day function. IT services outsourcing, right? Then IS audit function, cyber frauds, are they being reported, etc. Business continuity planning. And let me tell you, BCP itself is a huge opportunity. BCP itself is a huge opportunity. Then comes customer education and legal related issues, right? So that is the opportunity when it comes to banks. Then comes IRDA guidelines, often not spoken of at all. It is perhaps one of the forgotten things. IRDA has a beautiful framework which is totally worth spending some hours looking into it. Really worth it. Why? Because it's a simple framework, not a very complicated thing, and it gives you everything crystal clear. And in fact, when you look into IRDA, it clearly says what is it that you have to look into. And if you ask me, it is a simple guideline. You can just print it and start using it. It itself, they themselves have given a checklist also. So it becomes all the more easier. Now, first is asset management. Now, what is asset management? How are you taking care of your assets? Do you have a track of assets? Now, you might say, I'm a small company, I have 10, 20 assets, I have a track of it. Imagine banks, institutions, financial companies, or any large companies. They have 500, 5,000 computers. Do I have a track of it? What is the data stored in that? Right? Do I have a feature of storage of data, download of data, right? Modification, is antivirus in place? Is in my information security taken care? So there are a bunch of things which you can probably be looking into in that very, very own framework. Next is access control. I think we spoke of this IDAM, right? So that's a very important thing. Next, you have what is called as asset management. Okay, slightly related to the previous point. I think it's just a repetition there. Business continuity, BCP, again, that's a huge potential. Then you have what is called as cloud security in case you're using cloud-based applications. Again, let me also remind you, any company using cloud-based applications, you need to have the data only within the Indian servers. That means geographically, especially all these key informations, you need to have it within India only. Okay, so you need to have it within India only. So it's recommended that you have the data within India. Okay, if you're looking into any banks, if you're looking into any of this IRDA, BFSI related data, simple. You need to have it only within. Okay. Next, you have what is called as communication security, transfer of data, compliance with the various regulatory environments, right? Then you have what is called as cryptography, encryption standards, right? And then you have what is called HR security, human resources security. Okay, and human resources security is as simple as, how are you taking care of the employee every time employee joins in, right? Every time he exits, access related things. So those are very basic things, which is, sort of essential. Then comes your information security, supplier relationship. Supplier relationship, separate topic, I'll speak of it so that you don't need to worry too much on that. And then you have your incident management. What do you mean by incident? Incident refers to a scenario or a particular setup where you are actually subject to some sort of, a breach, a violation, a vulnerability, any of those. Those are typically we refer to as an incident. You have operation security, day-to-day operations, backup, all of this, physical and environment access, system development, I think I spoke of. So if you notice very carefully, a bunch of these requirements are all focused on ITGC, information technology and developments. And most of the cybersecurity framework focus on ITGCs only. Okay. Then you have what is called a very, very interesting thing, ISNP. Okay, I think it is self network platform. I think insurance self network platform or something like that. Basically, e-commerce for insurance company. Insurance self-networking platform, right? Self-network platform. So here, there are, I think, a bunch of requirements. Again, a policy guideline is available. How are you offering products? How are you displaying it? Today, many of the companies have gone for having their own internet-based setup, their own, technology-based setup where they're hosting. So today, can I buy insurance policy in any of these ICICI, AXA? Of course, they're now merged. Let's say any of these large players, ACO, Digit, correct? Can I buy it in their own portal? The answer is yes. And each of them this becomes applicable. So how are they taking care of this entire thing? And they've given a clear nomenclature, definition, etc. Go ahead and just get started with this, right? Then comes SEBI. SEBI also has given what is called as a cyber security and cyber resilience framework. In case tomorrow if there's an issue, how well are you able to take care of it, right? Governance, protection, access control, network security, data security. There's something called hardening. What is hardening? Making a device or a software difficult for attack. A simple example is, if you go any of these online banking websites, username and password, you have an option to enter. Sometimes it will not open the password field unless the username is activated. Some other times when you are entering username and password, you have to enter a CAPTCHA. Why? Because it is preventing a system-driven attack, what is called as a botnet attack or a denial of service attack. And for that, CAPTCHA becomes a very important. So your website is hardened, making it difficult for a possible perpetrator. Likewise, hardening refers to all measures deployed. I repeat, all measures deployed, which makes your device, whether it could be hardware or software, difficult for you to attack, right? So hardening here, we are referring to physical device hardening, or it could be the logical software hardening. Now, a simple example is I double click on any of these computers or any of the systems, and I notice that, there is a possibility of installing any random software. Now, for that, you bring and enforce a control by ensuring administration access is restricted. Only on authorized software you can install. So those are very basic things from a hardening perspective. We'll move on to another exciting opportunity, which is called a SOC. Now, today, what's happening? There are various organizations or individuals like you and I who are outsourcing or cloud sourcing various activities. And this is outsourced either to, it could be payroll outsourcing, bookkeeping outsourcing, healthcare outsourcing, or IT support outsourcing, or you are using their cloud service providers, or you're using a SaaS-based application. The biggest challenge is, if I've outsourced these organizations, please ensure how sure am I that the risk in this outsourced organization is taken care of, right? That's a bigger question. And this user entity, that is you and I, or the entity using these services, needs to provide comfort to a bunch of these users. It could be auditors, it could be customers, it could be GRC, internal users, right? So how do I give them a comfort? One option is I say I will appoint or I will ask my auditor to go and audit all of these entities. But imagine I'm using a software like QuickBooks, Zoho Books, etc., and I cannot expect my auditor to go and audit Zoho Books. It's so very vast. They will not even entertain us. So what is the best way out? The best way out is basically appoint what is called as a service auditor. Now, service auditor is an independent professional who audits these outsourced companies. And as a part of this, he audits the systems and organization controls, and he gives a report. And that report is used by the users on this left-hand side. And the most popular reports he gives is called as a SOC 1, SOC 2, and a SOC 3. SOC 1 is for if you're outsourcing financial related services. SOC 2 is if you're outsourcing generic services. SOC 3 is any, a general report which is available on the website. So you can go and download Dropbox SOC 3 report, GitHub SOC 3 report. If you just go download, you will get it, right? SOC 1, SOC 2 is all privileged reports. Only an authorized person will have access to it. Now, what is the comfort for you? Now, you as a user entity are getting comfort on the operations of this. And as a part of this, the service auditor also looks into the cyber security. He also looks into the cyber security. Let's take an example. A user entity, let us say your own office, your own CA firm, or your client, is using a service organization such as Dropbox. Now, Dropbox has hosted all of their data in Amazon. Okay, that's the truth. It's not a myth, it's a truth. Dropbox uses Amazon service. So Amazon is providing an infrastructure as a service. Dropbox is providing software as a service. So software as a service is layered on the infrastructure as a service. And this is an entire integrated pipeline, right? So the sub-service organization is Amazon, service organization is Dropbox, and user entity is your organization or my organization. Now, where is the potential? The potential lies in auditing the service organization, which is just mentioned out here. When you audit the service organization, there is a possible risks which you can uncover or unravel, and you plug it, giving an assurance to the service organization and all the users of service organization, which means in today's world, many of us are outsourcing a lot of works to third parties or other organizations. Each of such organization to whom the outsourcing takes place, that organization should be subject to a SOC. The only challenge in a SOC is it should be signed by a CPA only, because this comes under the AICPA framework, which is nothing but the US Chartered Accountancy Regulation. Alternatively, if you feel, hey, I want an Indian Chartered Accountant only to sign, that is also possible. Just wait for 5 minutes, I'll cover it. Okay. So as I told you, it is basically a system and organization controls report. It is published by an audit firm that documents their independent opinion on the design and operating effectiveness of the internal controls. I hope you're clear with this. Yeah. And as per SOX, this is mandatory. IFC also indirectly makes this mandatory. Many companies in India are outsourcing their payroll operations. Many companies in India are outsourcing their payroll operations. So therefore, that itself is a huge potential for you to look at this, right? So if you feel that you as an organization or your client's payroll operations has been outsourced, look into that organization who's actually performing the work and see what are the controls they have. You can ask them to go for a SOC certification. I think, sorry, I've repeated this. So they're typically user entity who's using this. Then you have the service organization and you have the sub-service organization. Sub-service organization is further outsourcing. Service auditor, the independent CPA who is auditing this. Right? I think I've given this example. I don't want to go too much into this. There is also what is called as a SOC for cyber security. Again, this comes under AICPA. It's a framework through which organizations can communicate the cyber security risk management and CPA sorts of reports on it. Now, please bear in mind, CPA can do the audit. He cannot do the implementation. As chartered accountants, we can do implementation, right? That itself is another opportunity. Okay, so that is on SOC. The Indian Desi version is called as SAE 3402. It is nothing but a standard on audit engagement 3402, which says how a service auditor can give an assurance to the user entity. But here it is only on the internal control relating to the financial reporting. It's only relating to internal control relating to the financial reporting, which means what? Only if you're outsourcing financial related exercise, you can use SAE 3402. If you want to verify cyber security per se, remotely you can use this, but not exhaustive. Okay, and this standard applies only when service organization is responsible for assertions about suitable design of controls of the user entity. Okay, and this is something is worthy for you to explore, especially in the Indian context. You have again here in SOC we have what is called as a SOC 1, SOC 2, SOC 3. Here you don't have variations, you just have one version which is equivalent to that of a SOC 1 of US. You don't have a SOC 2, SOC 3 equivalent in India. And what does this report give you? That report gives you a reasonable comfort that all the material aspects as explained in the service organizations, the description are taken care. That means you have a design, you have implemented it effectively, they are operating effectively, correct? So design of control and operating effectiveness, both of them can be taken care. And within these reports, okay, you have a type 1 report or type 2 report. Type 1 is on design, type 2 is on operating effectiveness. What is the difference between both of them? You may have a refrigerator which has suitable places to keep everything. You saw that it looks fine, it is designed. But was it kept suitably in the last 6 months? Was it operating effectively? Is the refrigerator temperature adequate? Is that object which is kept, is it remaining safe, or is it becoming stale within 1 day or 2 days? That is operating effectiveness. So that is where it becomes very critical. So operating effectiveness tests it for a larger period, minimum period of 6 months it will test it. Okay. At this point in time, again, I want to pause for taking a few questions, because we're talking about multiple things. So, as a listener, you may find it, too overwhelming, or, a few things going above your head. So then and there, I thought I'll clarify the doubts. I hope you're enjoying it. If you have any questions, feedback, please drop it, because we are almost 1 hour up. I have another 45 minutes. So you have few more opportunities which I want to discuss. So feel free to drop in the chat window. I'll give you the details. I'll be sharing the presentation. I'll give you my details. Don't worry. I'll also talk about, what are the certifications available in case you feel that, that is useful. You can probably pursue your career in that as well. Is CISA certification mandatory for cybersecurity? There is no mandatory requirement for any cybersecurity framework. However, some of the regulations in India make it indirectly mandatory that only if you have a CISA qualification, or certain cases only if you have a DISA qualification, you will be able to get that sort of a hands-on advantage. Okay, so in that cases it becomes a mandatory, otherwise it is absolutely fine. So again, if you're looking into full-time employment, in full-time employment, again it may be necessary to have these certifications. And what are these certifications? I'll speak about it a little later. There are a bunch of those things which we can cover it when the appropriate time. Because you will just you'll be wondering, oh my goodness, there are so many certifications in cybersecurity. So I don't want to take you to that level. When time comes, appropriate time, I'll push it. Any other question which I've missed? To start such service, what step we should take? Okay. The first step is realization of what I know and what I don't. The first step is, what is it that I know? What is it that I don't? And how will you figure out what is it that I know? What is it that I don't know? Simple. Go through any of these regulatory frameworks. Just go through any of these regulatory frameworks. You'll get a clear-cut idea saying that what is there and what is not there. The moment you understand that, my dear friends, it becomes all the more easier for you to discuss about any of these things. If that itself is not clear, I would suggest that, it is not a cup of tea which you should be looking at. You need to have basic knowledge, but you need to top it up with certain other things. I'll speak of these certifications, you will get an idea. Is there a best training program? There are a bunch of these training programs. Again, I'll speak of all the training program certifications towards the end, so please be a little patient. Prerequisites for an experienced CA, whether you're experienced or inexperienced, whatever it may be, your domain knowledge is always going to add value, coupled with your understanding of technology. If you're able to do that, I think you have a huge potential. I am a CA in practice in small town, but I want to get into this area. My dear friend, today there is nothing called a small town or a small this thing. It is proven, the COVID-19 has proven that entire world is your opportunity. You just require time, and the way in which you start acquiring clients is something which you have to get through. That is something, it will happen over a point in time. But yes, it makes a lot of sense for you to go through a few of these certifications that will give you extra push. I'll cover all of those in a while from. What is the technology knowledge that the individual should possess? There is no end to it, sir. There is no end to knowledge. So it's not that, okay, I do this and you are done. I took this road not taken probably about 5 or 8 years back, and today I'm reaping the benefits. I started off with one IT audit in an entire year. I started off with one IT audit in an entire year. It moved on to one in 6 months, once in a quarter. Today, almost once a month, I am at least loaded with 3 to 5 engagements purely on technology. Purely on technology, right? And that is the amount of investment I put in terms of time, in terms of reading. You need to be on top of it, right? I read, and that is what has taken me here. Otherwise, I'm not saying that you name anything, I'll be able to answer. At least I have some idea, and then we have to go into this. We'll cover that. There are a lot of ISACA portals, ISACA knowledge forums where you get updates. So we'll speak on that as well. Okay, so I think I've covered fairly a decent part of it. Let me come back to next important thing. Okay, what is the last question I'll take. What is the importance of you pursuing Python language? Which one is better? Which one platform? Okay. First and foremost, Python is a language, programming language, popularly used today in the domain of data analytics and data science. It can be used in other domains also. Okay, and it is fairly having a mechanism. It's a basic programming language. What a programming language does, it can do. You can develop apps also using Python. Today, that's become a more modernized approach. But Python is just one part of it. Information security is completely different. When you're focusing on information security, you are not doing any hands-on job. You're rather reviewing. Somebody else is doing something, you're just reviewing it, or you're enforcing the security. There might be some amount of configuration, validation, evaluation. Okay, so that is where it comes. Okay, now let's move on to the next professional opportunity, and this is called as third-party risk. Huge potential. Why? Today, almost every organization is using a third-party service provider. Almost every organization is using a third-party. When you're using a third-party service provider, have you assessed the risk of the third-party service provider? Larger corporates, they have about 100 to 200 odd vendors. It's an annual exercise to review their third party. So if you are able to enter into engagements where you're doing the third party risk review on a recurring basis, right, you will be able to set up an entire timeline or an entire yearly exercise where periodically or regular basis you're keeping on verifying this third party risks, right? So what exactly is third party? Third party is used to define suppliers, vendors, subcontractors, correct? It could be even any of these organizations, could be vendors, manufacturers, whatever it is. And third parties can be upstream or downstream. Upstream refers to suppliers and vendors, downstream refers to distributor resellers, correct? And this is basically how the third party has been defined under the global practice. But when we talk about today, we're talking about supply chain, we're talking about service delivery. There's a whole lot of interrelationship between various parties. Now, if that organization is having a breach, my company also may be impacted. An example could be Air India, of course, 2-3 months back or 6 months back. They had come up with an announcement saying that there was a massive breach in one of their vendor operations. As a result, Air India's passenger information was breached. Who had the access? Vendor had the access. Vendor systems were breached. Who had to pay the penalty? Air India had to right? So you can understand what is the importance of this entire. So if you look into a vendor relationship, this entire thing is a cycle. Any organization, first they create a vendor profile, they establish what is acceptable risk, they assess the nature of data to be stored, they provide third-party network accesses, correct? They periodically review the data. They involve legal departments, reviewing contracts, analyze all the access, decommission third parties, physical, in case the organization is moving out, auditing the third party, ensuring there is a contingency, and retire a third party. This is a typical vendor relationship cycle. Across the cycle, there are multiple stages where you can do third party risk assessments. Now, what do you do there? Risk in the onboarding. Check whether the vendor registration form is in place. Now, you might think vendor registration form means what? GST compliance, TDS compliance. No. How am I, as an organization, giving information to that third party or my vendor? Is there a questionnaire for me to understand what all risks he has, or what is the setup in his organization? The moment that questionnaire is filled in, using that help of that questionnaire, we can see how we can mitigate or identify that risk. Do I have to go ahead or not, etc. Right? And you review this. So you do an assessment mitigation. The same thing, you sort of, check whether the remediation is performed by them. If the answer is yes, you say whether it's acceptable or not acceptable. If it is acceptable, great. If it is not acceptable, remove the vendor. And then you do periodical assessments and you do overall ranking. Now, you might have data which is fairly critical. These critical data you ought to protect it. And when you're protecting this critical data, it implies that your vendors also have to protect it. If your vendors are not protecting, you will have to pay the price for it, right? So that's basically a typical cycle. What are the opportunities over here in the entire third-party risk management? At a planning stage, at a building stage, at a program management stage, or a risk assessment stage, correct? So you can develop multiple risk frameworks within your own organization setup, right? So you, at the planning stage, you can probably help the client in building it, or in developing a third-party risk management checklist. Today it's available again in public domain, or nothing works out, take an ISO 27001 checklist. Third-party digital risk platform. Then you have a third-party risk assessment, right? And what you see on the right hand side is more of a recurring opportunity. What you see on the left hand side is more of consulting, one-time implementation, integration, whatever is that. So you can build some sort of technology or solutions for that. Even simple Excel spreadsheets, you can give it to the vendors, ask the vendors to fill in. You assess, you do some bit of a review and give an opinion to your client, or basically to any person who's hiring the vendor. And this is your typical scope. If you ask me, this itself is a very good information security checklist. Do you have a security program? What are the types of security program? What is the depth of it? You have HR security. You have asset management. You have access control management. You have cryptography, physical environment, operations. So there is a bunch of these questions which ought to be answered. And from there, you can take it further. In US, there are a couple of questionnaires which is quite handy. One is called SIG Core. The other is called SIG Lite. SIG Core is a fairly large questionnaire which is designed for assessing service providers that can manage highly sensitive or regulated information. Then you have SIG Lite, which is basically a high-level understanding of information security. High level, you get a bird's eye view, more from a due diligence perspective. And these are popular assessment methods used in the globe. SIG, I just spoke of. A few of these SIG questionnaires are also available online. You can download it. Then you have the NIST. Then you have the VSA, Vendor Security Alliance. You also have the COBIT 5/2019, which is also a good guide for your vendor security management framework. Again, you could classify your vendors based on ABC. Tier A is basically, critical vendors. You might require an SIG, core, site visit, SOC 2, etc. Tier B is probably, you might have a smaller minor vendors, and you may probably just pick up any of these. And tier 3 could be, they're not accessing PII or any confidential data. So you can probably also do that. This is a typical example of a questionnaire: information security, development, maintenance. Does your company perform application development? Do you have application testing? So once you start filling up this, you get an idea saying how it is, what it is. Based on the scorecard, based on their responses, you audit them. So it's more of a self-assessment questionnaire. The problem with this existing setup is companies don't have time. Companies do not have time for it. Therefore, you can actually figure it out how to. Then you have what is called as data privacy. Data privacy is the new boy in the market. Heavy potential. Heavy potential. Why I say that is because the moment you say that I'm going to talk of privacy, 100%, including the board, the eyebrows raise. Because today it is a board topic. Gone are the days. So if you see the last few years, the revolution in the IT field was driven by a lot of modern things, but security became a core important area. The next few years, privacy is going to be a huge area. And when I speak of data privacy, I'm talking about PII. What is PII? Personally identifiable information. What is personally identifiable information? Any information through which you can identify a person. What is that? You can think of. I am storing the name of somebody. I am storing the name of somebody. Can I identify who that person is? It may not be you or Z. Say, for example, the moment I say Narsimhan, you will know, okay, fine. There's somebody by that name, Narsimhan. The moment I say, let us say, Isha, you know somebody by that name is there. Right? So you can identify. It may not be me. It can be somebody else. But to a large extent, can I identify? The answer is yes. And that is where today a lot of companies are extensively using data, and it becomes an area for concern. It becomes an area for concern. Because if there is a breach, impact is massive. The impact is massive. And let me tell you, there are regulations across the globe. Regulations across the globe which say that what you are supposed to do and what you're not supposed to do. That is where is a big cause of concern, right? So let's spend some time on understanding what is a PII. Simple examples: your name, your bank account number, your vehicle, date of birth, medical information, sexual orientation, email, facial recognition. All of this becomes PII. And a bunch of these things today are recorded and stored by various organizations. Could be companies, it could be third-party entities, etc. Now, defining policies surrounding it, right? How do you take care of it? How do you protect it? Have you taken the consent? All those becomes critical. These are a few examples: name, email, social media, medical info, bank account details. And where can you find it? You can find it in emails, you can find it in documents, you can find it in database, you can find it in removable media, USB sticks, right? Metadata, log files, backup. So it becomes critical that you sort of safeguard and secure it. Now, why is data becoming a huge area or point of discussion? There's been a lot of business around data. Information is being traded. There are new products which are being available. You are selling raw data to brokers, right? You are obviously, giving some insights of data through subscriptions. You're trying to improvise the process performance, correct? You're building or you're solidifying relationships. So there are a lot of things you're trying to do with that data. Let's also bear in mind that the regulations across the world in terms of data is increasing significantly, right? In US, Canada, or for the matter, Europe, all those places which you notice in red are all heavily regulated, right? And probably this image would have undergone some more change if I probably look into this website. I took it at least about 3 to 4 months back. And today, if you ask me, there have been much more stringent regulations. China has a stringent regulation. Russia has stringent regulations. South Africa, Japan, correct? All these countries. Next 2 or 3 years, expect a sea change of regulations, which is what. But the advantage or the biggest point of all of these regulations, they have certain common principles. You can audit or you can define those principles. And these are generally accepted privacy principles, right? How are you managing the data? Who is the organization? Is there a policy, procedure? Is there a governance structure? You're a holding company, subsidiary company. How are you exchanging information? Notice, have you informed the data subjects what you're collecting, how you're collecting, what are you intending to do? Choice and collection. Again, data privacy is a whole separate CP webinar topic. I'm going to give you only a gist of it, right? And if you notice, each of these topics or each of these slides which I speak of is a separate area of discussion, right? You have a whole lot of 2 hours, 3 hours discussion. I can just go on that, or I can do a workshop also on that, but let's park that a little later. Next comes your choice and consent. How are you taking care of choice? Who is giving the consent? How is the collection taking place, right? Are you retaining the data for the requisite period, disposing it off, etc.? So that comes under this first bucket. Second is access. Do you have the individual access to information? Who has access, what, when, why? Are you informing this information to third parties, disclosure? What is the baseline security? What is the quality? Monitoring and enforcement, right? So these are the few essential principles when it comes to data privacy. And if you are able to build this, if you are able to get this thing set up, then my dear friends, again, another area where you can audit it, and see where it actually goes. Okay. Before I move to the next part, are there any questions which you would want to discuss? Okay. Are the service providers to audit ERP access control in a private company? I'm not too clear in your question, Shakil. If you could just are there any service providers to audit ERP access in a private company? There are a bunch of service providers who can audit it. I myself do so many audits of all these ERP based setup. So if your question is on that, I think the answer is yes. Okay, Chirag is asking this question. Hi Chirag, thanks for joining in. Are you what is your views on the data audit? Okay, I mean, it's something which I cannot explain in 1 minute. Data audit is huge, correct? Just for your reference, we're talking about how PIA is going to be captured, the entire data lifecycle management, starting from the time the data comes into the system until the time I revoke or delete the data. The data coming in, the modification, the alterations, the changes, whatever happens, that entire cycle is called as the data lifecycle. Okay, so that is typically what happens when it comes to this data audit, and that's where there is a potential. And especially if you are organizations which are critical, sensitive data you're storing, including banking records, insurance record, healthcare records, there's a mandatory requirement for audits, right? And you also have to do a data privacy impact assessment. Okay. Should I focus on compliance audit or consulting in data privacy? Both of them are options available. First 1 year, you will obviously do consulting. The subsequent year onwards, you will focus on audit or regular retailership. Opportunities are there. And if you have fairly understood GDPR and data privacy laws, I think you can go ahead. I think I already spoke on this, Jogendra. Currently in India, we don't have a codified data protection law. However, I told you Information Technology Act coupled with Information Technology Sensitive Protection Data Regulations is acting to a limited extent as a quasi data protection law, typically applicable for certain large companies only. However, there is no regulator as such, and in the proposed data protection bill, expected probably by this year or next year. We'll have to see. It could probably take shape, and there could be newer opportunities coming. Great. So I think I've clarified most of them. On purpose, I'm taking regular, questions just for the benefit of all of us, so that we don't miss out. So every topic I told you is independent. You could choose one, you could choose all. The choice is yours. For instance, there are a few of these topics I've decided, of a few of these domains, beg your pardon, that I've decided that I will not be doing it, and it's a conscious call. Whereas there are a few others I go into the depth of it. For example, SOC is something which we do extensively. Okay, extensively, right from implementation, gap assessment. Of course, we have the independent CPA who signs off. So the entire consulting space of SOC we do. Okay, but there are some elements which we probably do not. So the choice is yours, how you want to get into it. Then you have one more opportunity called as the VAPT, Vulnerability Assessment Penetration Testing. Now, what is this? This is nothing but whatever you have seen, in that fancy movies where somebody is sitting something, trying to hack systems, etc. A typical guy is this. He is doing a vulnerability and a pen test. Okay, of course, there he does in an offensive manner or to bring down the system. Here we do it in a defensive manner or to safeguard the system. Okay? So what is a vulnerability? It's basically a review of network devices, servers, systems to identify key weaknesses or any configuration issues that an attacker may be able to take an advantage. In simple language, identify weaknesses. A simple example could be, I'll give you a very, very basic thing. You go into an office. You walk into an office. There is a LAN cable. One LAN cable is hanging. The moment you take that LAN cable attached to your laptop. The moment you attach it to your laptop, you start using it. You are able to access the server. Possible or not? The answer is yes. It's an internal vulnerability. Anybody can connect. So what is a preventive measure you do for this? Only authorized systems or systems with predetermined setup, you enable the rule in your firewall, they can have access. Otherwise, a clear no. So even if you bring your personal device, you will not be able to access. A simple control like that, right? So a vulnerability analysis is identifying, of course, I simplified it in a very, very easy to understand manner. I'm not going to the technical jargons, right? Vulnerability assessment. Then you have a pen test. Now, pen test is basically trying to attack your system, typically your website or any internet-facing applications, so that what if an attacker tries to attack, can he bring down your system? If the answer is yes, if he can bring down your system, how can I try to pretend like him? I will not bring down the system, but at least I'll get to know what are the weaknesses, right? So here, you go for an in-depth activity where you're trying to focus on various possible routes, correct? It could be even one of the things in pen test which we do is a phishing campaign. What is a phishing campaign? Send an email as though you're a legitimate person with a link. The user will be given a link to download. The moment you download that link, user will enter credentials, thinking that to be the original site, whereas in reality, it is not the original site. Right? So here you identify vulnerabilities and weaknesses. It is not when you're doing a pen test, very important, you will not do it on the live environment. You will create on the simulated environment. Why? Because if you do on the live environment, you're asking for trouble. Right? Nobody wants somebody to pay money and attack their main system. You would create a simulated environment and attack it so that the weakness over there you can fix it. Right? So that's something. Normally it's done on the pre-prod or test, or don't do it on dev, test or pre-prod, or they replicate the environment for a limited purpose or limited time and try to attack. So what is the scope? This is a huge bucket. And please note, this requires lot of technical knowledge. I will not say huge, not that we cannot achieve it, but it requires some bit of training. And there is a wonderful course called CEH, Certified Ethical Hacking, which is a preliminary step for you to probably specialize into this, right? You do network scanning, port scanning. Network scanning is what I told you, right? Port scanning, system identification, vulnerability scanning. And here, many of the places you use certain tools which can scan those. Operating system fingerprinting, service fingerprinting, access control mapping, DOS attack, DDoS attack, man in the middle attack, man in the browser attack, DMZ. So these are all typical core technology driven, but you can pick and choose what you want to and how you want to do it. And this is just an indicative slide for you to get an idea. Then comes a very, very easy to use standard. It is a very, very easy to use standard, and that's an ISO 27001. Information Security Management Standard. As the name itself says, it is a management standard. So it starts with governance, how you need to put things in place, etc. Right? So when it comes to ISO 27001, it talks about the baseline requirements what organizations will have to do. Typically, okay, just a background, it's basically an ISO international framework, right? It focuses on establishing, implementing, maintaining, and continuously improvising the information security management system. The aim is to help organizations become much better, more secure. Okay, and with the proportion of organizations that have embraced IT, ISO 27001 becomes a very clear starting step. And you could probably take up certifications in this as well. ISO 27001 lead auditor course or a implementer course is a good certification. Maybe you will have to spend about 1 or 2 weeks time. You have an examination, fairly simple. As long as you're able to understand the risk and the implementation, how to go ahead, this becomes a worthwhile standard for you to take it up, right? So ISO 27001. So basically here, the standard requires you to plan and conduct internal audits. So you can prove that, you are compliant with it. You also have an external audit. You can empanel yourself with certification bodies. Unlike our regulations framework where it says only you can do, only these people can do. In an ISO, anybody can do the audit, but the certification has to come from the certification agency. So normally certification bodies, within them, they have empaneled some people as auditors. This could be consultants, freelancers, or their own employees. But obviously they will empanel only if you have the prerequisite experience. So you can be a part of it, get yourself certified and get started. And there are a lot of free e-learning courses available on ISO 27001. Okay. By the way, there is also some few e-learning courses on Coursera, edX, and all these portals where you can get started with all these basics. And of course, nothing was to supplement a practical implementation, but at least you get a basic heads up where to go. Now, what you do in an ISO 27001 internal audit, you do documentation review, whether policies, procedures, standards are there. Are there evidences for the policy, right? Policy is just theory. Until you implement it, it doesn't make sense, right? Then you do a bit of analysis. See whether you can draft the reports. You have the management review. You have what is called as a CAPA tracker, corrective action, prevention action plan, and things like that, right? So all of those come in. Then you have the external audit, where the external auditor comes in. He reviews what the internal audit has done. He checks whether this has been performed, and the external auditor or the external certification will be done by the certification body. Okay, normally these auditors are a part of the certification body. Now you have the certification bodies like TUV. Some people call it as TUV. Some people call it as TUV. Then you have BSI, NQA. All these are fairly large players. You also have some smaller players, Exemplar and people. You can see how you can get yourself empaneled with any of these agencies, and you can perform the audit. Very interesting. There's a very nice mind map which I noticed in cyber security. Okay, because we're coming towards the end, I thought we should throw some light on these aspects as well. When it comes to the cyber security domain, there are a whole lot of interesting things like this. The one part of it is on the security operation. The other part, all of these focus on different things. So if you are focusing on security operation, there is a bunch of things which you get involved. You're talking about vulnerability management, data leakage, investigation, some bit of cyber forensics will come into picture, trying to uncover what happened. You're talking about SOC, you're talking about review of logs, SIM tools, correct? So SIM tools are basically the review event management tool. So in case any event has taken place, it will review that, it will track it. You have seen those fancy, display boards of a hacker in movies, right? He's looking at so many things. So SIM tool, he's using a few of those SIM tools to monitor that, basically saying what is the inward, outward movement of traffic, etc. So that is one side. There's another side which is focused on risk assessment. In this risk assessment, there are various things. I spoke of vulnerability penetration testing, correct? Within that penetration testing, there are multiple types. Blue team, red team. See, red team tries to attack. Blue team tries to prevent an attack from taking place. So you create that sort of simulated environment. So tomorrow you create two teams within your own organization. One is trying to attack, one is trying to prevent. So it is sort of a, how do you put it? It's more like a defensive mechanism for your organization, right? Then you have source code scan. Now, source code scan is a complete independent exercise. You need to understand some bit of programming language, and also you need to understand security vulnerabilities. A black box, white box approach is being used. So that is on the risk assessment. Then you have the security engineering. Correct? I'm talking about the broad things. Then we'll come into the other parts. Security engineering is we speak about access control. This is more on how you enforce the security, right? How do you have security taken care? How is access built into it? How is the identity and management taken care? How is the privilege management or non-privileged management? What is the security architecture, cryptography, data protection, federated cloud security? So that is on the extreme left, which you can notice. Then you have physical security, which is basic, common sense coupled with understanding how it is. Then if you are a governance focused person, you have the standards. You have the NIST. You have the ISO, which is information security, IEC standards. Then you have SANS best practices, all of those. Then within cybersecurity, you also have something called threat intelligence. Now this is more, a small specialized domain who actually sorts of, reviews what are the various possible issues, who attacks what, trying to get, is more like intelligence, trying to learn from that part of it and see how this can be. Then you have user education. It is something to do with, how are you making people aware? How are you training? It could be internal, external, etc. And then is the governance domain. Somebody was asking GRC, right? This comes into picture. How are you taking care of the law, regulatory framework? Are you taking care of the, audit portion? How do you have written procedures, policies, etc. Correct? So this is a broad bucket. Now you can pick and choose what you want to do. Right? Now, some of them require in-depth expertise. For example, if you're looking into that left-hand side security operation, there you require in-depth expertise. Right-hand side, if you're looking into risk assessment, especially on penetrations, code testing, and vulnerability, you require in-depth expertise. Whereas third-party, fourth-party risk, reasonable understanding of risk is good enough. So that becomes a good area for you to get started. So let me also highlight it so that it's easier for you. Sorry. Apologies, 1 minute. Yeah. So the area which possibly you can pick up is this, which is something which you can easily get started. The physical security, again, the easy one to get started. Then you have the access control as a part of your review. You can look at. In fact, security engineering itself, to a large extent, is a potential area. Framework and standard becomes an easy area for you to look into. Right? Career development is just general part of it. Governance is definitely an area which, as auditors, we can definitely specialize into. Right? Threat intelligence, security operation, and others, I do not recommend immediately. You may require certain other qualifications and skills. Right? Next, what are the career options available? Okay, this is courtesy CompTIA. CompTIA is again a certification agency as such. They have multiple courses. So they have spoken of various things from their level. What are the courses which is applicable for them? From information security, what all is possible, right? So they have a beginner, intermediate, advanced, and expert. Please bear in mind, this is in general what they have given. Okay, but few of them are given by CompTIA, few of them are not given by CompTIA. It is given by a third party. For instance, if you look into it, beginner invoice is given by beginner or novice, beg your pardon, is given by CompTIA. It's a certification agency, like how in India you have NIIT, etc. But these are fairly accepted globally. Now, if you look within this, you have something on CEH. Right? So this bucket of it is all to do with hacking and other related things. Right? And then you have advanced. This is to do with cloud security. Then you have CISA. Right? This is the DISA course which I speak. These are the CISA course we spoke of. Then here you have expert, which is the CISSP. CISSP is considered to be one of the most acceptable industry standard information security advanced course, and it is not so very easy to get it. And if you're looking into a career seriously into that, CISSP is one option which I would suggest, but don't get started with it directly. Step by step, I would suggest you to go to it. If you're looking into a ISACA certification, CISA and CISM, you notice over here. So these both are good options. Then you have network and cloud related. You have a bunch of these securities. So CCSK is another thing focused from cloud security. ISACA has come up with CCAK, Cloud Security, Certified Cloud Auditing Knowledge or something like that. ISACA has come up with that. That's another option. If you're looking into hardware infrastructure, you have ITIL. ITIL is basically information technology infrastructure library. Okay. If you're looking into IT management and strategy, you have again PINS and PMP. Again, not very much recommended, at least for beginners to get started with. And then if you have software development, you have a bunch of those things, DevOps engineer, etc. My suggestion and bet would be on getting started with CISA if you're looking into audit. Of course, DISA if you have done great, but top it up with these additional certifications because the perspective is obviously different. CH if you want to get into that part of offensive, defensive security. ITIL in case you are interested in service management. COBIT if you're interested in governance. And CISSP or CSAM if you want to go in depth into security, right? And this is also a nice certification chart which comes from various other organizations. I just found it on the internet. I thought I should be giving you this. You can go through it. There are a bunch of short forms, so I would not suggest you to go too much into the depth of it. This is probably, if I was speaking to an IT engineering or an IIT, I'll probably focus more on this. But I think this one slide will summarize you. If you're taking up courses from CompTIA, this is one. Taking it from ISC Square. ISC Square is considered to be a very, very industry standard association. Okay. And then you have our ISACA, which is basically IT Audit Association. So foundational, they have what is called CSX Fundamentals. Then you have intermediate, which is CISA. I mean, some people call CISA itself as advanced. And if you want to go into core security, CISA. Okay, so if you want to focus on audit, I think CISA is very good, coupled with few other courses. If you want to go for security, purely you want to get into security, I would suggest CISM or CISSP. In fact, CISSP, I would probably give a little more weightage compared to CISM. Of course, here you'll have to look much into the depth of it. Okay, do I have any other critical things which I want to cover? Let me just see. I'm conscious that we have a few more minutes left. Okay, I think I'm almost done with it. I just have one small part of it. Emerging technologies. Now today, you and I, as a human being, are having a lot of potential in terms of what we can think, what we can remember, we can feel, we can protect. We repeatedly perform things. We are available anytime. Our decisions are supported by data. The same thing is Industry 4.0 has changed. When we speak of thinking, we speak of AI. When we speak of remembering, we speak of blockchain. When we speak of feeling, we speak of IoT sensors. When we think of protection, we talk of cybersecurity. We speak of performing, doing activities repeatedly, RPA. Available anytime, the cloud. Or our decisions are supported by data analytics, right? So today, cybersecurity is required, of course, because all of them are focused on technology, right? So I would say that is more like an umbrella. An umbrella here is a little different to protect all of these technologies, including SOFIA. Okay, and how technology has penetrated into our profession, you're already noticing it. Started with cloud, started with data analytics. We're talking about RPA, AI, blockchain, and I think it's only a question of time how everything gets automated and things, right? So the way I look into it, I understand that we have another 5 minutes or 10 minutes. The way I look into it is the world's biggest problems are the world's biggest opportunities. So if you thought that possibly why is this a problem, why is the reconciliation issue, why is the information security an issue, what is cyber security an issue, I think it's time you actually relook into it and start seeing it as opportunities, right? So that's a quick brief about us, and this is what we are. And a few of the examples, right, from technology angle, what all we do, just for your idea, so that you also can start going a depth into it, right? IT governance, IT assurance, analytics, GDPR, AI, IoT, etc. Forensic audit, of course, forensic audit, cyber forensics is a separate stream. I didn't want to spend too much time into it. Automation, cyber security, training, SOC, PCI, trainings relating to this. So those are the world of opportunities which are available to you at Just. Thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity. I'll be happy to take Q&A, and I hope I did justice. I know a couple of hours, I cannot give you an entire roadmap to cybersecurity, but at least I gave you a perspective in terms of how you should be looking into what are the potential opportunities, and where you should get started, right? So I'm happy that we spoke and interacted. Open for questions. I've kept 10 minutes only for Q&A. You can unmute yourself also and ask your questions. Either myself or organizers will sort of, you can raise your hand, we'll just unmute you. And I hope I didn't bore the audience with too much of jargons and too many terminologies. But I had to stick to my basics. I didn't want to go too much into the depth of it because I'll have to start speaking on what is code review, what do you do, what do you do in vulnerability pen testing, etc.
Can I ask a question, Vishnu?
Please go ahead, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Essentially, what I wanted to ask you is, given that there are so many opportunities, so many things to do, personally, you and for everyone else, that is us also, which area would you concentrate on? So where to begin or which area to concentrate on? Now, should one start with governance or should one start with nitty-gritty hands-on system audit?
Sir, it's a very subjective question because each person has their own preference. I probably like South Indian food, but when I come to Bombay, I always have vada pav, right? And when you come down to South, you will always have your idli vada sambar. So it's a very, very subjective question. But what I have noticed is that few things which are most popular and it is easy to grasp, or it is more like ready to get started. First is the general IS audit overall. It is not going into too much into the cyber security, just the overall IS audit. Now here, the most popular is IT General Controls audit. As a part of IT General Controls audit, you can add an element of cyber security. You can define to what extent you want to add. For example, I will only review the cyber security governance policy. I am not going to review your vulnerability penetration testing. I am not going to do your vulnerability penetration testing, but rather I will check your vulnerability penetration testing. So I make it very clearly in the scope. So that way you can focus on. That is the lowest hanging fruit, easy to get started. And on one more reason why you can convince ITGC is, as a part of IFC, you can convince ITGC, Internal Financial Controls. You can please convince him on ITGC. That is the way you can get started. The other area which you can probably think of is data privacy. Considering the way in which things are changing, correct, and the importance, there is a huge potential. Okay. The third could probably be third-party security. Third-party security, SOC, all of this. Again, I will leave that to you. Over a point in time, you will be able to get that expertise or bring in a team, build a team. That's all.
Right. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir. Yeah, Mohan had asked one question. I missed it. NIST framework seems to be a nicely drafted for cybersecurity. Absolutely. Mohan, NIST frameworks is considered to be a fairly globally accepted and a benchmark standard. Okay, any other question? When there are less questions, I'm a little scared. Either audience understood everything or nothing.
It's the first one. They've understood. Now they're going to start in a couple of hours. There's
great. Happy that I've been able to throw some light and get going. Competition for me, but always a healthy competition is a good competition.
I think today more can be achieved with synergy than with competition.
Absolutely. Today, I don't think it is possible for one person to conquer the entire thing. No, I think it's the world of synergy, trying to collaborate and take things further.
Sorry, Namrata, you were saying something.
Sir, there are multiple opportunities to explore, and the ocean is it's wider than
ocean,
maybe Indian Ocean.
And as I told you, not only Indian Ocean, you can have the global oceans also.
Yes.
Because I told you there is a whole ball game.
Right. I think, Namrata, you would want to share some thoughts.
One thing that I've realized after listening to your session, Narasimhan, there are so many areas recently I received one message from Kotak Bank, thinking that a message is from authentic Kotak Bank customer care where they are informing me about my credit card. But after I clicked and after I put basic information, one information that they asked me where I thought that this is definitely a phishing website, and that's where I understood. So if somebody like us or maybe somebody like me, if could get trapped, then definitely we have a lot of opportunity to educate to our client across all the verticals. It's only a matter of time that how much thoughts we are giving to one particular topic and how much deep we go about and support the community at large. So rightly highlighted by you, Narsimhan, there are a lot of opportunities. It is just that we have to be in that meditative state to spot one and pick that one and just explore and make it big. That is
Absolutely.
all we have to do. One for Mr. Jogendra, I guess. He is asking one question, Narsimhan. Should I read it out?
Please go ahead.
While knowledge is one part of the individual, but when awarding assignment, organization looks for the experience of an individual. How can one start from the scratch?
Okay, that is a challenge which everybody will have to face. And Rome was not built in one day, right? So I think it's a very patient process which you will have to do, get started over a point in time. Collaborate with people, try to work with people, see where you can get some insights. And over a point in time, you will be able to achieve.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Narasimhan, for today's session. I think it's enlightening for all of us to have you here, share your knowledge, share your experience, and share your wisdom as well, and how practice can eventually be built over time, even for something like cyber security. So thank you once again, and I hope this was useful to all the participants who joined in. There were some questions on links, etc. So the video is hosted on the VCS YouTube channel. So you will be able to view this in some time on request basis at your end. And I think that's how we'll keep sharing information from the platform to all of you. Thank you once again. Thank you, Narasimhan. Thanks, Namrata.
Thank you, Ishan. Thank you, Narsimhan. Let's call meeting to a closure.